Okay, welcome everybody. This is a 26th Yartzeit memorial for Rabbi Meir Kahane, Sacred Tzaddik Kodesh L'Bracha, who was gunned down in New York, in Manhattan, 1990, November 4th. Died on the 5th, just after midnight. And it was a big tragedy and a big shock to everybody. I wasn't at that moment a follower of his, but that was the impetus. I had already started reading his books, but the impetus was there now to really go through his stuff, to see his material, and see what I didn't understand while he was alive. This month is Mar Cheshvan. It's called the Bitter Cheshvan. The bitterness of Cheshvan is something that it's known for. This month is a harsh month. We'll see in a minute. The 11th of this month is Rachel Amenu's Yartzeit, just passed. On the 16th is the Yartzeit of Shlomo Carlebach. On the 18th, which is this Friday night, is the Yartzeit of Rabbi Meir Kahane. And in between the 16th and the 18th is the 17th. If I'm correct, if I remember correctly, my numbers, between 16 and 18 to 17. In the Chumash, a couple weeks ago, we read that on the 17th of the second month, or the, whatever it says there, I think the second month, that's Cheshvan. Second month back then was after Tishrei. And so it said the 17th day was when the Mabul started, the flood started. So this month is full of a lot of things that went on. I don't remember which day of the month, but supposedly Yitzhak Rabin also was earlier in the month of Cheshvan, his anniversary of his being assassinated. In any event, so I want to talk about a few things. Rabbi Kahane said that if you don't know everything that I say, you don't understand anything. It's not just about throwing the Arabs out of Israel. There's a whole understanding of what the Torah is about, what the purpose of the Jewish people is, why Eretz Yisrael is so important and so absolutely indispensable for the Jewish people, and why it cannot have foreign elements, even if they were Swedes, peaceful, not terrorists. They were peaceful people. You couldn't give them a share in the land because God gave us the land to implement the Torah in it. So he also said, and I heard him say this myself the last time I heard him speak here in LA in 1989, he said that then it was right before the election that was coming up in 1990, and the election year, the election cycle, and actually he was also speaking here in 1988, and I heard him say this because that was right before the presidential election between, back then it was Bush Sr. and Dukakis. And he said, you vote for who's best for the Jews, who's best for Israel. You don't vote for a party. You may affiliate with the ideas of a party, Republican or Democrat, but that's not what a Jew does. A Jew has self-interest in mind primarily and foremost. It's not selfishness. Nobody's taking care of the Jewish people, just like it says in the Pirkei Avos. If I'm not for myself, who is going to be for me? The whole world runs after saving the whales and saving the Jews right behind them, saving the grapes and saving marching for civil rights. But when it comes to marching for Soviet Jews, when it comes to marching for Syrian Jews, nobody else marched with us. It was only us. The whole world, that's just the way it is. And so if you're not going to care about yourself, nobody else is. And it's not selfishness, it's self-survival. It's our taking our matters into our own hands and understanding that we only have Hashem and ourselves. Am Yisrael Chai, Od Avinu Chai, that's all we have. So therefore you vote for what's in your self-interest. Everybody else out there is voting for what's important to them, so we have to vote for what's important to us. So don't vote for a party, don't be ideologically tied to any party, just look at the candidates. and to the best of your ability. He also said another thing that's very important to understand. He said it really doesn't matter, all the goyim are irrelevant. All the nations of the world are irrelevant. All the leaders are irrelevant. Kings, presidents, it doesn't matter. Prime ministers, it doesn't matter. All that matters is our relationship with God. And he illustrated, and he said like this, we could have the worst guy in the world. Achashverosh wanted to kill us as badly as Haman did. Because Achashverosh, for different reasons, Achashverosh didn't want his kingdom split up. That's why he used to say to Esther and to other people, I'll give you anything you want, ad chetzi malchus, until half of the malchus, until half of my kingdom. What did the Medrash say on that? The Medrash, the Gemara in Megillah says, he meant, I'll say yes to anything you ask except to continue the rebuilding of the base of Mikdash that I stopped. Koresh, my predecessor, helped allow the Jews to go back and start building it. He was a fool. He was cutting into his own malchus, his own kingdom, and I won't do that. So Achashverosh, when he saw Haman wanting to take a chance to go after the Jewish people, he thought he was insane because he was afraid of this God, and the whole world was afraid of Yirmiyahu's prophecy that came true, that they got destroyed, like Yirmiyahu said, and they got exiled to Babylon, and then they were counting the 70 years and afraid to death what's going to happen in 70 years because they believed what Yirmiyahu said was true. Because they saw it with their own eyes that the Jewish people and the first base of Mikdash was destroyed, just like he predicted. So they were like waiting for the other shoe to drop. So everyone was mortified they're going to lose, and they saw Babylon fall because they tried to say the 70 years are over, and they used the kalim, the vessels from the base of Mikdash, and made it into a thing where they were celebrating that the prophecy didn't come true, and they don't have to worry about it anymore. And that night they fell. That was the famous writing on the wall, the hand that wrote, and Daniel came in and said, it means you're falling tonight, and then in comes the Persians and wipes them all out, and takes over the kingdom. So Achashverosh was also worried when he was king, but he had a party, and he started making use of the big day Kohen Gadol, as well as Kohen Gadol and the Kalim, and they had this big 180-day party, and then another 7-day party. In case you didn't have enough fun during the 180 days, you need another 7 days. I don't know, just for the home folk in the new capital, but trouble ensued. And when he saw Haman was willing to take a shot at it, he thought he was insane, like I said, because you can't start up with this God. But he said, go for it. And secretly, he gave him everything, you have to pay me, I'll give you the money, you go take care of it. He wanted to wipe out the Jewish people just as bad as Haman did. But what if the Jewish people do tshuva, like they did? Then Hashem turns the tables on the biggest Russia, the biggest Jew hater, and he couldn't do anything but listen to Esther that he was in love with, and do anything she said, and appoint her uncle / husband as the prime minister, and replace Haman, hang Haman. That's all because the Jews had a good relationship now with a God. We did tshuva, and we accepted the oral law, etc., everything that the Purim Maisa is about. So he could have the worst guy in the world. Obama did nothing to us for 8 years. He tangentially went to Iran, and he was planning other things. He wasn't able to do anything to us because God wouldn't let him. Leiv malachim biyad Hashem. The heart of kings is in the hands of Hashem. That's a pasuk in Mishlei. And it means like this. Melech, someone who rules the world, a president, has a lot of influence and power over millions of lives, can't have a full bechira chavshis, cannot have full free choice. He's too dangerous to the whole world, so Hashem removes some of his free choice. But it also means he can't do anything that, even if you don't deserve punishment from him, even if he's your enemy, he'll make you, the enemy will turn into your friend, the Gemara says. So that's what Achashverosh turned into, the biggest friend of the Jews. He didn't let them finish building the base of Mikdash. That's why it was much better when Esther's son took over, that they were able to finish building the second base of Mikdash. But at least he didn't go out to try and destroy the Jewish people anymore. And that was because Hashem holds his choice, his freedom of thought and action in his hand, in Hashem's hand. So on the other hand, you can have the best friend in the world. Everyone was saying George W. Bush is a born-again Christian, and he's the best friend we ever had in the White House, and we deserved a punishment. unfortunately, and he twisted Sharon's arm off and made him throw away the Gaza, and look how much we've suffered since then in 2005. And we got the best friend in the world, what we ever had in the White House, they were saying, when he first got elected. So you see, it's not up to the good. It's up to what Hashem wants for us, and he doesn't matter who's there. We can get punished or rewarded no matter who's there, depending on what we deserve at any given time. That's the way Hashem runs the world. It's only between us and Hashem. So he said, I want to read a couple passages. This book is vital. Uncomfortable questions for comfortable Jews, directed toward American Jews mostly, who need to wake up and understand what's going on. And he writes here that the real war is not between the Jews and the Arabs. He said we have a Jewish problem, not an Arab problem. The Jewish problem is much greater than the Arab problem. Once the Jewish problem is taken care of, the Arab problem will go away by itself. The Arab problem will go away by itself. And he says like this: there's a cultural war between Jews who want Torah and Jews who want basically continuation of what the Hellenist Jews were all about in the time of the Greeks. And he says like this, 76, so let me read you a couple of paragraphs so you get an idea of what his view was. Now the title of this whole weekend, they're having other in Manhattan, they're having a Canada, Toronto, they're having different memorials. They had one in Israel, and they're talking about taking back the Temple Mount as a priority, and we'll get to that in a second. But in order to get to the idea of having the Temple Mount really in our hands, where we could build the Beis Hamikdash, or at least start the avoda up, the sacrifice system again, sacrificial avoda service, you have to have a government willing to do it. Our government is not willing to do it for 49 years since it was liberated in '67. So he says like this: behind the surface that the tourists see, far from the sight of the American Jewish Congress climbers of Masada and the weepers and wailers and filmers at the Western Wall, out of mind of the happy neo-Zionists of Hadassah and the Long Island Temple Tour, with the rabbi along for a free ride to tell them what he knows about Israel, one of the great fiction efforts of our time, is the reality of an Israel struggling for its soul in a battle between Jews and Jews to decide what kind of a state it shall be. He wrote this in the mid-'80s, this book. A Jewish state, a home of a divine chosen special people, cloaked in holiness and wrapped in the mantle of difference, that we are different from the world, from the other nations. A people proud and confident, radiating the joy of being God's special people, blessed with the divine truth at Sinai, that raised it above the common and the profane, and divided from the nations who know not holiness and sanctity. Will it be that, or will it be the shabby imitation of cheap cultures that sully the greatness of man, the disgusting limitations of all that is animal and degrading of the soul, leaving the youth of Israel as nothing more than Hebrew-speaking Gentiles, without the slightest logical reason to remain Jewish, and certainly not in the pressure cooker and the potential danger that is Israel? Will Israel be the dream of centuries or the nightmare of modern times? This is the meaning of the struggle today between the Jews of Jewishness and those of profane Hellenists and gentilization. The Jews against the Hellenists. Far more than the Jews against the Arabs is the real struggle. And the Hellenists, with their destructive anarchy of worthless values, have already created a spiritual holocaust within the Holy Land. And he goes on, and I'm not going to belabor the point, goes on for quite a few pages, describing where the secular Zionists got their ideology from Europe. And he goes to great lengths in talking about, by name, the people who were the intellectual thinkers of the first Zionist congresses and the first Zionist Aliyah. And you see where the hatred comes from. where their anti-Torah stance comes from. That they, he says it, not me, he says it, that they would rather see the whole place go under than it go to be a Torah state. They would rather the whole Arabs overrun the whole thing and they'll just disappear. At least Torah won't win. That's how much they were set against God and against Torah in Europe when they turned against it, threw it all away, and they embraced socialism and communism and then ultimately labor Zionism. So that's what we're up against. You want to take the Temple Mount back into your hands, you got to deal with the Israeli government. They don't want it. They won't do it. They give all sorts of good excuses. We're going to cause riots all over the world if we go up there and take the mosque down. And I asked Rabbi Schechter, who's one of the leading Gedolim of America from YU, who'll be here in a couple of weeks for the OU convention. You can ask him yourself. I said that he was here for a visit a couple of weeks ago, and I said to him, I said, you taught me, I asked you a question in one of these conventions, are we allowed to build the Beis Hamikdash right now, if we could? And he says, no, there's problems with it, that basically you have to have a Navi to tell you where everything goes, even though there are Mishnayos and other Sforim that could be used to locate every place where every major thing goes, the ark and the altar and and how to build the building. We could do it ourselves. But there's certain things that we may not get right, and you're not allowed to have it wrong, so you need a Navi like Eliyahu Navi or somebody to come and tell you where to put things. So then I said, could we start the Avoda back up? And he says, yes, absolutely. There are things that we could do that we don't need a Beis Hamikdash for, like the Korban Pesach, or the Korban Tamid, which is the daily 2 times a day offering of the what we talk about in the Korbanos part of the Siddur in the morning. You could have sacrifices now, some of them. You couldn't do the Yom Kippur service too well, because that needs to do sprinkling of blood inside the Beis Hamikdash, and we don't have a Beis Hamikdash. So then, that was many years ago, 3-4 years ago. He was here, and I said to him, but could we do it in front of the mosque, or we have to take those mosques down in order to start the sacrificial services back up? He says, absolutely, you got to take them down. They're in Chilul Hashem. You can't do it. It's a Chilul Hashem to do it in front of those mosques. Those mosques don't stand for Judaism. It's not Hashem's building. So that's what we're up against. In order to do, Binyamin talked about it, Rav Meir talked about it. Binyamin is Rav Meir's son. We'll be having hopefully a Yartzeit for him. Unfortunately, the 5th of Tevis, January 3rd is when it is this year. And they talk about it. It says everybody talks about building Israel and settling Israel and expanding and settling all of the land. They want to do that part of it, but they don't want to do the hard part, to remove the Arabs from the land, so that when you do build it, it could be long-lasting. Because you don't remove the Arabs, and that's what we've seen in the Sinai, in Gaza, in the northern part of the Yehuda and Shomron. In the Shomron, we lost all those areas to this Oslo death to Israel process. And it's all because 2 sides of the same coin, Kivush Haaretz and Yishuv Haaretz. Conquering the land and living in the land, building it up, dwelling in it. You can't do one without the other. Sur me Rav, David HaMelech says, V'aseh tov. First you got to remove the evil, then you can do good. So everyone wants to do the good part and the fun part and build up the settlements and live out like pioneers. That's all well and good, but it's not lasting. The ground shakes underneath them because they are not removing the danger to their settlements. So the same thing is with the Beis Hamikdash. Everyone talks about we got to build the Beis Hamikdash and it's the glory of Hashem and we got to have the 3rd Beis Hamikdash, it's going to last forever. But nobody wants to talk about what has to happen before that, which is the removal of those 2 mosques. And in order to avoid the riots and the bloodshed and the terrorism that's going to ensue, you got to remove the Arabs from the land, because you can't build the Beis Hamikdash or even do the Korbanos with Arabs throwing rocks and shooting guns and who knows what else. Obviously, they have to be removed. It's not that we hate them, it's just that they're not allowed to live there. The Torah says they're not allowed to live there. Anybody who does not recognize God, this is His land. Anybody that doesn't recognize that He gave it to us, this land, for His reasons. Anybody who hates the Jewish people, hates the Torah, will not submit to the rule of the Torah on the land, is not allowed as a Gentile to live in Eretz Yisrael. They're not allowed. Doesn't matter if they're monotheistic, they're not allowed to live there. If they won't recognize Hashem's sovereignty and our sovereignty, then they can't live there. So everybody wants that. They're talking now about rebuilding. At least we'll get a synagogue up there. That's all well and good. That would have been great. 49 years ago when Rabbi Goren, the chief rabbi of the army, chief of staff of the army, the chaplain, suggested it and drew up plans for it. The whole southern plank of the Har Bayis, of the Temple Mount, is Herod's extension to the Beis HaMikdash itself. There's no Kedusha there like there is on the other side that you get Koresh for, God forbid. You're not allowed to go on that side. There's nothing wrong with, on the southern flank, going up there and looking at Har Bayis and davening up there or whatever. But it's too late. 49 years ago it would have been great to put a shul up there. Now we want a Beis HaMikdash. So we don't want to wait another 20 years until they pass it and then fight the Arabs over it and fight the liberal Jews over it and draw up the plans and build it. We don't want to wait 20 more years for the Beis HaMikdash. We want to go for it now. There's a Gemara that talks about all the things that has to happen in Sanhedrin, all the things that happen in the stages, because unfortunately we haven't deserved one clap, one bang, and the Gula is here, the good way, without pain, without suffering, without struggle. That hasn't happened. Since 48, it's been a slow, methodical, painful, bloody process to get as far into the Gula as we have. To start the Gula, but we haven't got to the end of the final Gula. So he goes through a list. If we go that way, here's the things that has to happen. The Jewish people have to come back to Eretz Yisrael. Waves of Jewish people then started coming back to Eretz Yisrael. Then they have to have sovereignty over the land. For 20, 30 years, they didn't have any sovereignty until 48. And then you're going to have an ability to restart the Karbanis service on Har Bayis before we get to the point of Mashiach coming and building the Beis HaMikdash, or rebuilding it and Mashiach coming after. There's stages. We're up to the stage now where the temple service could start. At least what we're able to do. The Korban Pesach and the Korban Tamids. I don't know about Musaf. Some of these other things. Maybe Musaf, offerings on Shabbos, Rosh Chodesh, and Yontiv. That's what we're up to. But to get to that, from where we are now, what would have to happen? The Arabs would have to be taken out, and the mosques would have to come down. And how is that going to happen? The Israeli government's never going to allow that. I don't know, even if you had someone like Moshe who believes in all this stuff, even if he was prime minister, he wouldn't allow it. He wouldn't feel he's got the authority to or the ability to. So we're stuck. And they talk about, the Vilna Gaon talks about it. He taught it, and his students wrote it down, that before the end of time, the end of days, there'll be a Erev Rav Israeli government. Spiritual descendants of the Erev Rav, he writes. And he says their main goal, their main tafkid, their main purpose will be to make a yachas, a union, between the heads of Yishmael and the heads of Esav, and bring them together with themselves to make a pact in order to push the two Mashiach ben Yosef and Mashiach ben David away and delay the Geula as long as possible. That's exactly what Oslo is. That's exactly what we're in right now. The delaying of the Geula Shlema because they don't want it. So obviously, there's none of us who are going to march on the Knesset or march on the Prime Minister's office and take them out of power. There's no coup d'etat from the army coming up, and there's no revolution in the streets of Israel coming up, and there's none of this is possible. Even if we wanted to, it wouldn't be possible. We couldn't roll out the tanks and the Black Hawks that they can to protect themselves. So what are we talking about? Talking about taking back the Temple Mount. So there's only one way. People have to be conscious that this is what we need for Klal Yisrael's spiritual survival, and they need to start